Hello, this is Melanie Koralnik, and for the next hour I'll be reading from the April 28th issue of the Toronto Sun on the Niagara Frontier Radio Reading Service. The first story is Sickening New Claims of Sexual Assault, Murder, Sex Games at Epstein's Ranch by Brad Hunter. Call it the Horror Hacienda. New bombshell allegations of twisted events at billionaire pedophile Jeffrey Epstein's Zorro Ranch in New Mexico are putting a new spin on the disturbing case. According to a new interview on Australia's 60 Minutes, survivor Shantae Davies is claiming the remote property was, quote, the most harrowing of all the fiendish financier's redoubts. Among the most sinister of the allegations is a mad scientist's baby-making scheme. Epstein's pimp and former paramour, disgraced socialite Ghislaine Maxwell, oversaw a, quote, human farm, and would allegedly snatch babies from their mom's arms. The scariest was Zorro Ranch. In the series of Australian 60-minute interviews, survivors said even men were subjected to a sex attack. They also accused the FBI of squashing information about bodies possibly buried in the desert. Davies was trafficked across his far-flung properties, including his private Caribbean island, New York, Paris, and Saint-Tropez. Most terrifying of all was Zorro. Quote, the scariest was Zorro Ranch. It's in the middle of nowhere and surrounded by mountains and miles of dirt, Davies told 60 Minutes. There was a lot of time being in my room, like a mouse in a trap, waiting for a knock on the door, and for someone to say, Jeffrey is ready for his massage now. In Epstein's orbit, massage meant rape, she said. While Epstein was a hardwired pedophile, obsessed with underage girls, the documentary is the first time that he and his coterie of like-minded pedo pals drugged and raped men at Zorro. Strangled to death during sex. A man actually claims that he met Jeffrey Epstein, was brought to the ranch, he was drugged, and he describes in detail a scene in which multiple young men were raped at the ranch in front of him after he was drugged. Democrat Congresswoman Melanie Stansbury said, yes, Jeffrey Epstein and Ghislaine Maxwell were serial abusers. They really were super predators, and it was just how they lived their lives. One of the most eyebrow-raising claims is a leaked email from an Epstein employee claiming 2 women died at the ranch. It was alleged that the women were strangled to death during rough sex with Maxwell and Epstein. The tip was allegedly passed on to the feds in 2019, but it was ignored. Rough fetish sex. The email read, quote, did you know somewhere in the hills outside of Zorro, 2 foreign girls were buried on orders of Jeffrey and Madam G? Both died by strangulation during rough fetish sex. Stansbury told the program she was alarmed by the information and contacted the New Mexico Attorney General. She gave the tip credence because it followed the evil pair's pattern. The explosive documentary also reveals that Epstein was a eugenics nut who was obsessed with the perfect gene pool. Davies said some girls woke up in dark rooms with doctors standing over them. It wasn't clear what, if any, procedures had been performed on them. There is another account of a baby actually being born and Ghislaine taking it. I remember overhearing conversations about creating the perfect baby from the perfect gene pool, Davies said, adding that Epstein was keen on human cloning. NM State Representative Andrew Romero described the claims of harvesting organs and forced pregnancies as the stuff of a horror film. But Epstein had many powerful and wealthy friends and benefactors involved in a wide array of endeavors. when authorities in the state started looking at the horror hacienda in 2019. Former New Mexico Attorney General Hector Balderas says he was ordered to stand down by the feds. Victims paid the price. In 2025, Balderas learned that the FBI sat on the murder tips, blowing them off as lacking probable cause. "For the life of me, I can't understand why you would leave New Mexico out," he said. Now, the state has established a truth commission to get to the bottom of the terrifying claims. While investigators have focused largely on crimes committed in Palm Beach, New York, and the Caribbean, it is now Zorro Ranch's turn in the spotlight. There will be missed opportunities for accountability where victims will have ultimately paid the price, Balderas told the UK Sun. Prosecutors are barely learning to understand today how heinous and how much violence and exploitation took place throughout decades. Locals called 7,500 acres Zorro, the Playboy Ranch. But nationally, the vile deeds that unfolded there have largely been overlooked. Epstein, who died in August 2019 while awaiting his sex trafficking trial, bought the property in 1993, specifically as a hub for his sex trafficking machinations. Documents show that Epstein did have lists of apparently local women's names with the word massage listed next to them. Former prosecutor John Day told the UK Sun. But we know that he also victimized so many young women at his various properties that we have to assume Zorro Ranch was one of the abuse locations. Epstein seemed to like the remoteness of Zorro Ranch, and the ranch has been overshadowed by the claims about the Lolita Express jet and the Rape Island facts. Day added, "More questions arise about Epstein's ties to New Mexico local politicians and prominent people. Did he treat them the same way he treated the elite of New York's finance, entertainment, and political worlds?" Davey said of Epstein's web, "I don't think there will ever be a full disclosure of it all." There is an undated photo taken on board the plane that Jeffrey Epstein owned, and he's sitting in one of the seats in a gray hoodie. He's got salt and pepper gray hair. He's leaning back with his feet up and smiling. He's barefoot. And Ghislaine is seated across him and is leaning forward and laughing. And then there's some other guy that's not named who's sitting closer to the camera wearing the most bizarre pants, this really weird patterned pants. Photo courtesy of U.S. Attorney's Office via Reuters. There is a picture of Jeffrey Epstein's Zorro Ranch in New Mexico. I am surprised. I didn't expect it to look like this. It's surrounded by a lot of greenery. There's grass and trees. This is an aerial picture. And the complex itself is massive. I would venture to say it's bigger than Trump's Mar-a-Lago. And design-wise, there is a whole lot going on. It's kind of got a New Mexico vibe on one wing with the shape of the roof, and then kind of Taj Mahal in another, Italian in another. It's sort of mismatched. And yeah, just a bunch of buildings kind of put together in a U, and then some offshoots. Photo courtesy of U.S. Southern District of New York. That story was Sickening New Claims of Sexual Assault, Murder, Sex Games at Epstein's Ranch by Brad Hunter. The next story is Mark Carney Liberals Trumpet Canada's Resilient Economy in Spring Update by Brian Pacifiume. Ottawa. A stronger, more resilient Canada. That was what the government promised Tuesday as the Mark Carney Liberals tabled their spring economic update in the House of Commons, describing the intra-budget statement as a clear update of their plans to bolster the economy while entrenching Canada's sovereignty. The world is more uncertain, But despite that, the Canadian economy has proven to be resilient. Finance Minister François-Philippe Champagne said during a Tuesday afternoon news conference, adding that Canada has entered a new world order of trade, investment, and sovereignty. Canada is moving forward with ambition and purpose, charting a path forward through the fog of uncertainty. The economic update is based around four main pillars: building Canada's economy and sovereignty, supporting Canada's workers, increasing affordability, and making safer and stronger communities. Measures concerning trade diversification, Canada's critical mineral strategy, and the Defense Industrial Strategy were all previously announced in the 2025 federal budget. Deficit projections down since budget. The 2025 through 26 deficit is forecast at $66.9 billion, $11.5 billion lower than what was forecast in Budget 2025, or just over 2% of the GDP. This is at the core of being fiscally prudent, Champagne told reporters Tuesday afternoon. Our strong fiscal position is the result of serious, thoughtful, and responsible decisions on behalf of all Canadians. The deficit, according to the update, is expected to decline to $53.2 billion, or 1.4% of GDP, by 2030 to 31. As well, the update predicts the federal debt-to-GDP ratio will remain stable until 2030 to 31, and come in a percentage point lower than what was predicted in the last federal budget. There is a picture of Finance Minister François-Philippe Champagne and Prime Minister Mark Carney. It was taken on April 28th of this year, and they're standing side by side. Mark has his hand on Francois's left shoulder, and they're both holding up some pamphlet that appears to read Un Canada fort pour tout, I don't know, something in French, and there's a picture of mountains and forests on the cover. There is also a pair of Canadian flags behind them, and then what appears to be hockey jerseys laid over their seats. Photo courtesy of Blair Gable via Postmedia Network. That story was Mark Carney Liberals Trumpet Canada's Resilient Economy in Spring Update by Brian Pacifiume. The next story is NHL and Broadcast World mourn sudden death of goaltender turned analyst John Garrett by Lance Hornby. John Garrett, who made his mark in net for 2 major leagues and turned his talents to broadcasting, has died suddenly at 74. Sportsnet announced his death Tuesday morning. In semi-retirement, Garrett had been staying this week in Salt Lake City, working first-round games of the Utah-Vegas series. A cause of death wasn't listed. Cheech was a legend, the network said in a release. A beloved colleague, friend, and one of the most familiar voices in Canadian hockey. His warmth, humor, and genuine love for the game endeared him to fans and colleagues alike. He brought insight, authenticity, and heart to every broadcast. He'll be remembered not only for his remarkable career, but for the kindness and joy he shared with everyone who had the privilege of knowing him. Our deepest condolences are with his family and loved ones. Drafted by the St. Louis Blues in 1971 from the junior Peterborough Petes, Garrett instead broke into pro with the World Hockey Association's Minnesota Fighting Saints. In the WHA's often rocky path, he went from the Folded Saints to the Toronto Toros, and their eventual transfer to Birmingham, Alabama. In author Ed Wiles's WHA memoir, The Rebel League, Garrett relayed the story of Dave Keon, the former Leaf great, and ex-Bruins' star Johnny McKenzie showing up late for Saints practice, going to the rink via the bank, as the club's failing payroll could only afford their big-name salaries. Garrett said the other players would tip over arena pop machines for loose change. He ended in the WHA with Gordie Howe and the New England Hartford Whalers, and they're absorbing into the NHL in 1979, eventually credited with an assist on Howe's final NHL goal. You are listening to a reading of articles and features from the Toronto Sun on the Niagara Frontier Radio Reading Service. Why was he nicknamed Cheech? Garrett then played for Hartford, Quebec, and Vancouver in the NHL, his nickname originating from his long hair and mustache, resembling Cheech Marin of the Cheech and Chong comedy fame. With self-deprecation, he laughed along to his other monikit Lotto, which grew out of his final season's goals against average of 6.49. Not a day I wouldn't smile just hearing the name Cheech. Until today. Hockey Night play-by-play man Chris Cuthbert posted on social media. Heartbroken to learn of his passing. So many laughs, great memories. He was one of a kind. Garrett might have gone into management upon retirement with the Canucks in 1986, offered the assistant GM post in Vancouver by Harry Neale. But Neale's firing led Garrett to the broadcast booth, color commentary on Hockey Night, then to CTV and regional games with Edmonton, Calgary, and Vancouver after Sportsnet was created. Before Sportnet's major deal for the lion's share of NHL broadcasting rights, Garrett would fly to Toronto to join a hockey panel that included Nick Kypreos, Darren Dreger, now with TSN, and managing editor of hockey and former Toronto Sun sports editor Scott Morrison. It's not a cliche to say no one spoke a bad word about John, Morrison said Tuesday. He brightened everyone's lives and always asked how your family was doing. He'd stay in Toronto for weeks during playoffs and come over for a barbecue. Garrett was part-time with the Canucks and Sportsnet after 2023. The team stating Tuesday it was devastated by his loss. He had the rare gift of making every broadcast feel personal, drawing fans into the game with humor, storytelling, and his unmistakable voice. Forever a Canuck, the team said in a statement. There is a picture of John Garrett, and he is sitting in the broadcast booth. You could see the equipment behind him. He is wearing a set of headphones with a microphone placed in front of his mouth. He's got brown hair that's kind of graying at the temples, a gray and brown mustache, and blue eyes. And he's wearing a suit and tie. He's smiling into the camera. Photo courtesy of Al Charest via Postmedia Network. That story was NHL and Broadcast World mourned sudden death of goaltender turned analyst John Garrett by Lance Hornby. The next story is Anti-Semitism Continues to Fester Under Mark Carney Liberals by Warren Kinsella. 1 year ago today, Mark Carney's Liberals won a minority government. 1 year later, there has been a lot of analysis about what Carney has accomplished in that year and what he hasn't. It's a mixed bag, with much of the commentariat adopting a wait-and-see attitude. Voters, however, are pretty enthusiastic. Angus Reid's pollsters say Carney is approved by 60% of Canadians, which is only a bit less than where Jean Chrétien was a year in. Abacus says 54% of Canadians approve of the job Carney's government is doing. Just under 30% disapprove. Both Angus Reid and Abacus say not many people feel the country is on the right track, however. So, there's lots of polling happening at the 1 year mark. But nobody has really measured another important subject: how Canadians feel about the effectiveness of the Carney government in fighting anti-Semitism. Because, make no mistake, Jew hatred is really, really bad in Canada. And since Carney's election, it has gotten demonstrably worse. At present, Canada is considered to have one of the worst anti-Semitism problems in the world. 6,800 anti-Semitic incidents reported in 2025. This week, as it does every year around this time, the human rights organization B'nai B'rith released its annual audit on anti-Semitism in Canada. The audit, all 45 pages of it, covered 2025, which in fairness also includes the Justin Trudeau era. But it's all the same Liberal government, of course, with many of the same faces. The B'nai B'rith, it said birth before, now it's B'rith. The B'nai B'rith report looks at crimes mainly harassment, vandalism, and violence. Many incidents are not reported because Canadian Jews, understandably, fear blowback. Or because, justifiably, they feel police and prosecutors won't do a damn thing. So, there were at least 6,800 anti-Semitic incidents in 2025, B'nai B'rith said. That represents an increase of nearly 150% since 2022. The report is littered with awful photographs. Jews are evil, says some graffiti. Save a child, says another. Kill a rabbi. A swastika inside a Star of David. Zionists equals Nazis, says one leaflet that was passed around. There is nothing worse than being a Zio, says one sign held up at a protest. The Ku Klux Klan leader David Duke coined that one, Zio, and on and on. Ontario leads the way with nearly half of incidents. The report contains many depressing revelations about the explosion of Jew hatred in the time in which Trudeau and Carney possessed power. 847 incidents in British Columbia, 677 in Alberta, 841 in Saskatchewan and Manitoba combined, 384 in Atlantic Canada combined, 573 in Quebec, and in Ontario, the biggest number of all, an extraordinary 3,194 anti-Semitic incidents. Anti-Semitism was always pretty bad, said B'nai B'rith. But after October 7, 2023, when 1,200 Israeli men, women, children, and babies were slaughtered by Hamas, the situation became dramatically worse. Said B'nai B'rith about online expressions of hate, quote, "Since October 7, anti-Semitism has become even more dominant, more concentrated, and more constant. Online platforms are now the principal arena in which anti-Semitic hostility is circulating, escalating, and reaching people. Zionism, the simple notion that Jews, like all of the world's peoples, are simply entitled to a homeland in the place where they have existed for centuries, has come in for particular venom in 2025, B'nai B'rith noted. The increase in attacks on Jewish life in Canada during 2025 was in no small part related to the demonization of Zionism, they wrote. During Canada's 2025 federal election, candidates' posters and offices were defaced with pejoratives and hateful imagery directed at their perceived support for Israel and Zionism. Some Jewish candidates had their posters desecrated with swastikas. Even schools for kids being targeted. Carney and his candidates would have noticed that, one presumes. Swastikas sprayed across the faces of liberals and non-liberals would tend to stand out. But since he has been elected Prime Minister, things have gotten markedly worse for Canadian Jews. Whatever Carney and his government are doing, it isn't working. Yet more evidence of that came on the heels of B'nai B'rith's depressing report. something called Just Peace Advocates, which has not registered itself as a charity or a nonprofit to which law would apply, started a campaign seemingly targeting Jewish children. Quote, "Schools are supporting the Israeli military with our tax dollars," it screamed, demanding that the federal government go after those schools created for, check notes, Jewish kids. It was so awful, so cruel, that the Center for Israel and Jewish Affairs and other Jewish groups offered a joint statement that was more sad than anything else. Quote, "There is a coordinated campaign to erase Jewish life in Canada," they wrote. And there is. And what has Carney done about it, really? Nothing. There is a picture of the back of the Jewish Leo Beck Day School on Arlington Avenue. I guess it's in Toronto. It was taken July 30th, 2024. And there was a fire there that the police are looking into. One of the windows was broken, so it's all covered with plywood. There's a scissor lift next to it. And then you can see next to it the building is charred from the fire, and there is all kinds of charred debris on the ground. Photo courtesy of Joe Warmington via the Toronto Sun. There is another picture that is taken outside of a synagogue. You can just see the corner of the building. It looks like it's gray, maybe it's concrete. And there is a sign on it that says, I believe it says Holy Blossom Temple. And closer to the camera lens are two armed men wearing all black outfits with a black kind of helmet thing on that has a light on the front. And they're holding these baton type style, like giant guns with batons. And yeah, one is looking one way and the other's looking the opposite direction. Photo credit goes to Toronto Police. That story was Anti-Semitism Continues to Fester Under Mark Carney Liberals by Warren Kinsella. The next story is Ex-Disney star turned porn actress. You Are Just a Product Being Sold by Brian Towie. Maitland Ward, a former actress on teen sitcom Boy Meets World, who left the entertainment industry to pursue a career in pornography, says she doesn't regret her shift into adult entertainment, and that the decision turned out to be more lucrative than her mainstream Hollywood career ever was. Ward, 49, opened up about her career in porn on an episode of HBO Max's Hollywood Demons, saying that the change allowed her to take ownership of her life and make much more money. On Boy Meets World, I think I made $20,000 or $25,000 an episode, Ward said, per US Weekly, or Us Weekly. In porn or OnlyFans, I can get six figures a month. There is also my adult film sales, and I am creating this brand. I can make it go for as long as I want it to go. Ward joined the cast of Boy Meets World in 1998, playing Rachel McGuire until the end of the series in 2000. She also appeared in the movie White Chicks and the television soap The Bold and the Beautiful. In 2019, Ward abandoned her career mainstream Hollywood for the porn industry, where she now has a massive following. Darker side of Hollywood. Ward recently told Fox News in an interview that she was put into provocative positions as a minor on set and was becoming a product of a twisted male gaze. I can't speak to how Hollywood is today because it's such a different animal than it was back when I was getting into it. Back then, I think they looked at these young actors as like property coming in, Ward said. And I really believe the studios, they wanted to mold and form these young actors into what they wanted them to be, what they needed them to be for the company and for the audience, to what they felt they would identify with. You were just a product being sold, and you knew that yourself," Ward said. "I mean, I didn't think anything was wrong at the time with anything that was going on, really. I mean, it felt ill at ease in my own body and all my feelings and stuff, but I thought that was just me being stupid. I have to be professional. I have to be part of that Hollywood machine." And that's really what it was. There is an undated picture of Maitland Ward. She is on the red carpet at some kind of event. You can see there's a step and repeat section where there are other people in evening wear standing and posing for cameras. She's walking down the red carpet towards the camera, and she's wearing a hunter green sequin dress. It has one long sleeve and then the other is just a spaghetti strap. She's wearing a gold necklace that has a lock on it, and her hair is like a fire engine red. And she has heavy makeup on that's kind of that green color to go with her dress. She's very beautiful and very curvy. Photo credit goes to Getty Images. That story was ex-Disney star turned porn actress. You Were Just a Product Being Sold by Brian Toey. You are listening to a reading of articles and features from the Toronto Sun on the Niagara Frontier Radio Reading Service. The next story is Are Cold Case Killers NCR Thugs Getting Away with Murder? By Brad Hunter. Most days, Rodney Nichols is on another planet. The 83-year-old is suffering from dementia, trapped in his diseased mind, apparently unaware of the heinous crime he's accused of committing. Nichols has been deemed unfit to stand trial in the horrific 1975 sex slaying of a woman who is known for decades only as the Nation River Lady, whose body was found in the water east of Ottawa. Time is the cop's enemy. Forensics, particularly genetic genealogy, has completely changed the game for cold case detectives. Across the continent, one unsolved murder after another is being solved. In Canada, some of the most vexing homicides are now being cleared. But the problem for cops and the victims' loved ones is that the alleged killers are aging. Many are now dead. Others, like one-time rugby player Rodney Nichols, have brains that are scrambled. Time is the sworn enemy. Detective Sergeant Steve Smith, head of the Toronto Police Service's widely acclaimed cold case unit, told the Toronto Sun that, unfortunately, sometimes the clock runs out. Does the killer get away with it? Depends on how philosophical you want to get. Often, the main thing the family wants to know is the motive, the why. Smith said sometimes a burst of bloodshed is utterly inexplicable. Investigators can often give families the names of those responsible, but not always the reasons why, he told The Sun. While all involved would prefer to see these individuals face justice and acknowledge their crimes, there remains a lingering question. Do they bury their actions, or lie awake at night anticipating the truth catching up to them? The weight of what they have done. He added, one can only hope they are left to confront the weight of what they have done. Smith knows of what he speaks. The detective solved one of Canada's most infamous and long-standing unsolved murders, the October 3rd, 1984 abduction and murder of 9-year-old Queensville girl Christine Jessup. From the start, the investigation was a gong show, and neighbor Guy Paul Morin was convicted and caged. Morin was the wrong guy. By 2020, the case had been transferred to Toronto Homicide. Using genetic genealogy, Smith and his team identified the killer, a Jessup family friend named Calvin Hoover. Hoover killed himself 5 years before the cops could come knocking. It brought the family answers they had been waiting to hear for decades. and it vindicated once and for all Guy Paul Marin, Smith said. In 2025, the Grim Reaper again beat detectives to the punch. Kenneth Smith was identified as a serial killer responsible for the cold case murders of Christine Prince in 1982, Claire Sampson in 1983, and Gracelyn Greenridge in 1997. Kenneth Smith passed away in 2019 at age 72. Cops have speculated that he may have claimed more victims. At a recent court appearance, Rodney Nichols looked every minute and then some of his more than 8 decades on the planet. It took nearly 50 years for OPP detectives to catch up with Nichols. He was charged in 2022 with the murder of 48-year-old Jewel Parchman Langford. For decades, Langford went unidentified, a Jane Doe known by the sobriquet, the Nation River Lady. Langford had been Nichols's girlfriend back in the Me decade. Her remains were identified in 2020. When cops caught up to Nichols, he was rotting away in a Hollywood, Florida retirement home. A price in the hereafter? But at the end of a 3-day fitness hearing in L'Original, Ontario, east of Ottawa, it was pretty clear that the old man in the wheelchair didn't understand a goddamn thing. He is a shambles of a man, once robust, now diminished. Still, maybe when the hourglass runs dry on alleged cold case killers, the karma cops step in to mete out justice that was missed in this realm. There is a black and white picture of Jewel Parchman Langford. She's the one who disappeared in 1975, and she looks like a Hollywood movie star. I think this might be a wedding picture because she's wearing a white lace dress. It's only really a head and shoulders picture. And her hair is done really nice. It's brown and wavy, and she's got a white veil on that's like a net. Anyway, she's got brown eyes and just really lovely. Photo courtesy of Facebook. There is also a picture of Detective Sergeant Steve Smith. He is the head of the TPS Cold Cases and Missing Persons Unit. He is wearing a gray suit and tie, standing in front of a brick building and some shrubbery. He's holding some papers in his hand. He's bald with a salt and pepper beard and mustache. And he's sort of smiling looking at the camera, but it's sort of intimidating at the same time. Photo courtesy of Brad Hunter via the Toronto Sun. That story was, Are Cold Case Killers NCR Thugs Getting Away with Murder? By Brad Hunter. The next story is New School Program Aims to Curb Decline in Maple Leafs and Hockey Interest Across the GTA. By Lance Hornby. When free Maple Leafs tickets go unclaimed by young people, it's a sign of weak soil in the grassroots. Immigration lawyer and season ticket subscriber Mario Bellissimo recalls his shock when he and brother Anthony offered their seats to grade 7 and 8 bursary winners in the Toronto District Catholic School Board, expecting they'd be eagerly snatched up. Instead of hands going up around the room, there was nothing. Zero, Mario said. It was all Raptors and TFC they wanted. We were definitely seeing a decline. That's not only troubling for a 109-year-old team in its own backyard, but troubling for hockey itself in the 21st century Canadian landscape. It isn't just a newcomers thing. It's the barriers to access points in hockey, Bellissimo added. The kids believe they're already shut out. Yes, it's a sport that's been here a long time, but they think that's not for us. That's when we activated. The brothers began a twofold initiative. Make sure Maple Leaf Sports and Entertainment knew of and shared their concerns, getting in touch with CEO Keith Pelly, while Mario assembled an all-star team for an in-school program to reinforce hockey's cultural link. One of the poignant things for me had been attending a school skating event where certain kids couldn't participate because they had no skates. Anthony and I wondered if this was just our bad experience. But when we first tried to set up some events in schools, there was some hesitation. No, our kids aren't interested in hockey. I thought, this can't be happening in Toronto. In my work in settlement communities, you can argue hockey is not familiar to all, but it is a familiar cultural guardrail. Which brings us to Stronger Together, of which Mario is co-founder and executive director, and where on Monday more than 600 students and teachers crowded the gym at St. Conrad in Downsview. Many were Leafs on NHL colors, pushing the decibel level to welcome Mario, Leafs great Rick Vaive, Callie Armstrong, the granddaughter of Leafs legend George, and MC Mike Wilson, the ultimate Leafs fan. Juno Award nominee entertainer Marcus DiDomenico of the TDCSB warmed up the kids with Stompin' Tom Connor's The Hockey Song. It was the second of 8 events for the group as they put the finishing touches on the program. What is the group's message? A big part of the message is you don't have to wear a team sweater to feel part of the game, said Wilson, who has hosted similar past initiatives with partner Deb Thuitt. You can be a coach, referee, manager, trainer, stats person, or write about the game. Or play ball hockey, field hockey, even tabletop hockey. Mario presents his own experiences of his late father coming to Canada from Italy in the 1950s, with no idea of what end of a stick to hold, but immersing his children in the Leafs and the winter pastime. Wilson has many tales for the young audience of Leafs history through his vast memorabilia and sports appraisal business, while Vaive brings first-hand on-ice NHL experiences. Callie, who played at Harvard, is an engaging storyteller, just like her 4-time Stanley Cup winning grandpa, and active in hockey instruction, encouraging other Indigenous girls and boys. We did a Q&A at the end for the kids at the first school we visited, and right away 300 hands shot up, Wilson said. 4- and 5-year-olds listened to every word. They all bought in. It reinforces that hockey defines us as a nation. The Bellissimo Brothers' letter to Pelly a year ago not only received favorable response, he took them to dinner to hear more about these 3 tenets of Stronger Together: teamwork, inclusion, and participation. We thought we might get the brush off. Here's a Leafs hat, thanks for coming. But it all worked out. We had more meetings and correspondence, gave Mr. Pelly some ideas, part of which MLSC has implemented. What are some other suggestions? Other suggestions by the brothers, such as making tickets more affordable for families through methods such as restricting resales, will take longer consideration. But we also thought, let's do something ourselves, Mario said. We didn't want this just to be rah-rah about pro hockey. Let's get something curriculum-based with student activity projects. Getting green-lighted for junior, senior, and high schools in the Catholic and Toronto District School Board was a huge boost. Where 30 schools in Toronto was Stronger Together's modest goal to host presentations this year and next, it's now approved for 160 more with activity packages and teacher resources in JK to grade 8 in the TDCSB. At St. Conrad, there was a table full of Leafs and Marlies merchandise as incentive to participate in questions, or to give to those who put the most into their hockey-related assignments. In this particular disappointing season, with no playoffs let alone a cup, Wilson is sure the Leafs will want to remain relevant through Stronger Together. After 1992 and 93, when the Blue Jays won the World Series, amateur baseball exploded when the Toronto Rock won 3 titles youth lacrosse took off. Then TFC and the Raptors winning it all got those sports bigger. The Leafs haven't won, so there's no relation for kids to copy any heroes. It's been 59 years since their last cup. Their parents weren't even born, unlike a time when Toronto or Montreal were in the final every year. You are listening to a reading of articles and features from the Toronto Sun on the Niagara Frontier Radio Reading Service. What are the 3 tiers of Stronger Together? Maple Pathways, introducing students to hockey's full ecosystem. Everything coaching, training, analytics, sports science, business, media, music, event staging, management, and community work. Mini rinks, big dreams. Through venerable and minimal logistics of tabletop hockey, many sets will be made available to students. They'll take a break from video screens and electronics. The knobs, spinning players, and goaltending rods encourage fine motor skills, strategies, and face-to-face communication to be augmented by creative writing and storytelling. Skates on, spirits up. Inclusion for those without proper equipment, either because of cost or access. It's hoped adults and kids with unused skates or gear will donate to schools or offer anything from advice to joining a league, community skate, or provide a ride to the rink. There is a picture taken at St. Conrad, and students are seated on the floor of an auditorium, it looks like, and they're all looking at the camera. It looks like they're shouting. Some have their hands up. Someone is sporting a peace sign in the very front. They look like 5th and 6th graders. They're all really happy. And then in the background, you could see some adults sitting on chairs. Photo courtesy of Dan Bodanis. There is also a picture of Mike Wilson, St. Conrad Principal Christian Fazzini, and Rick Vave as they attend the Stronger Together presentation at St. Conrad. So they're all wearing jeans and some form of a blue jacket. One is a Toronto Maple Leafs jacket that's blue with a white maple leaf in the middle, and he's got number 4 on his arm. And the other guys have like a round decal kind of thing on their jacket. They all, 2 of them have gray hair and 1 has brown hair. And behind them, there are trophies and banners and other school things like that. Photo courtesy of Dan Bodanis. That story was New School Program Aims to Curb Decline in Maple Leafs and Hockey Interest Across the GTA by Lance Hornby. The next story is James Comey indicted for alleged Trump threat with 8647 Instagram post by Ling Hui. Former FBI Director James Comey was indicted Tuesday over allegations that a photo he posted last year on social media constituted a threat against U.S. President Donald Trump. The allegations against Comey stem from a photo he posted to Instagram on May 15, 2025, of seashells arranged to form the numbers 8647 on a beach. The indictment said that by sharing the image, quote, a reasonable recipient who is familiar with the circumstances would interpret as a serious expression of an intent to do harm to the President of the United States. The number 86 is slang, meaning to throw out, to get rid of, or to refuse service to, according to Merriam-Webster. With Trump being the 47th U.S. president, Republicans and administration officials were quick to slam Comey's post, accusing him of calling for violence against the president. Threatening the life of the President of the United States is a very grave violation of our nation's law, said Acting Attorney General Todd Blanche on Tuesday. The grand jury returned an indictment alleging James Comey did just that, at a time when this country has witnessed violent incitement followed by deadly actions against President Trump and other elected officials. The temperature needs to be turned down, and anyone who dials it up and threatens the life of the president will be held accountable, he added. The former FBI director had been interviewed by Secret Service last year for the since-deleted post, which he captioned, "Cool shell formation on my beach walk." The indictment was brought in the Eastern District of North Carolina, where Comey reportedly owns a beach house. He faces a charge of threatening the life of the president and a charge making an interstate threat. He faces a maximum sentence of 10 years in prison if convicted. Former FBI director responds to charges. Comey responded to the indictment with a video posted on his Substack account. Quote, "I'm still innocent. I'm still not afraid. And I still believe in the independent federal judiciary. So, let's go," he said. Shortly after deleting the photo last year, Comey posted a statement on his Instagram account saying he didn't realize some folks associate those numbers with violence. "It never occurred to me, but I oppose violence of any kind, so I took the post down." Comey had also commented on the photo's controversy while promoting his book in New York last May, stating his wife spotted the seashells, and they both talked about the number 86. While at Barnes & Noble in New York City, he said he remembered it was slang for saying something was boring and should be ditched, the Associated Press reported. Last September, Comey was indicted on charges of making false statements and obstruction of justice. But the case was thrown out by a judge who concluded that the prosecutor who brought the indictment, then interim U.S. Attorney Lindsay Halligan, was illegally appointed. There is a picture of James Comey taken on May 30th, 2023 in New York City. He is on some kind of a stage, and he's wearing a dark gray jacket over a black t-shirt. He's holding a microphone. He's talking about something. He's in his 50s or 60s. He's got really dark, kind of, I think, black hair with silver on the temples, slightly hooded brown eyes, and, decent looking guy. Photo credit Dia Disasopol via Getty Images. There is also a picture of what he posted to Instagram, and it's just the sand with some, I'm sorry, it's just so sweet looking that I just have a hard time here. The shells are either black or like an orangey color, and they're just face down, and it's 86 next to 47. That's it. Photo courtesy of Donald Trump Jr.'s Instagram. That story was James Comey indicted for alleged Trump threat with 8647 Instagram post by Ling Hui. The next story is U.S. federal agents raid Minnesota child care centers in fraud probe. Reports by Ling Hui. U.S. federal agents served multiple search warrants Tuesday in Minnesota in an ongoing fraud investigation by the Trump administration of publicly funded social programs, authorities said. 22 federal search warrants were executed at daycare and autism centers in the Minneapolis-St. Paul area, according to local news outlets KSTP-TV. Though few details have been released, KSTP-TV said at least 15 child care centers were raided as part of the operation, which began early Tuesday. Many of them had ties to the Somali immigrant community, according to a Washington Post report. Today, the FBI, with federal, state, and local law enforcement, is involved in court-authorized law enforcement activity as part of an ongoing fraud investigation, the Department of Justice said in a statement obtained by the Post. Box of files removed from daycare during raid. One of the daycares raided was identified as Metro Learning Center, which federal agents entered after using a battering ram, according to a KSTP TV reporter. The owner of a building told the Washington Post that the agent spoke to the daycare's owner and left with a box of files. Mohammed Kali told the Post that about 40 businesses had operated out of the building, and that most of them had closed for the day following the raids. Raid linked to Medicaid fraud investigation. If you commit fraud in Minnesota, you're gonna get caught. And that's exactly what we saw today. Minnesota Governor Tim Walz said in a statement posted on X, "We catch criminals when state and federal agencies share information. Joint investigations work, and securing justice depends on it." The raids targeted Medicaid providers and were not linked to federal immigration enforcement operations, sources told local TV station KARE 11. In February, the federal government announced it was deferring $259 million in federal Medicaid funding to Minnesota amid a fraud investigation over certain state social service programs. There is a picture that was taken today as the Metro Learning Center was raided by federal agents. So in this picture, there's 6 FBI agents that are walking out of what appears to be a building that has a mural of an elephant on it, and they're all carrying like cardboard banker's boxes full of documents, and they're wearing hats and FBI vests. Photo courtesy of Mark Van Cleve via AP Photo. That story was U.S. federal agents raid Minnesota child care centers in fraud probe. Reports by Ling Hui. You've been listening to a reading of articles and features from the April 28th issue of the Toronto Sun. Your reader has been Melanie Guralnick. Thank you for listening.